Welcome to our budget
Front door's open
forum.
right now.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tom Grattan.
Here.
Brian Tobin.
Here.
Paulette O'Frias.
Here.
Scott Latham. Tom Kennedy.
Here.
In the event of an emergency, everyone can exit through that one door into the park.
That brings us to the budget forum part, which is where we ask our community's
I know.
input and any additions or deletions to our budget. Since nobody's here to make any such wishes or recommendations, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Dr. Moore.
So just very quickly, this is the start of budget season for us. BOCES starts a little bit earlier than us, so we're starting to get numbers from them about their programs. It happens to be our insurance, the insurance company that we use is based on the same year as us, so we have their numbers already, where if you have NISHIP, you're not getting them until January, late January, sometimes even February, because they go on calendar year. We were all expecting cuts this year, and quite honestly, I'm still expecting them, but I can tell you the last two times the governor has spoken, she has made comments directly about the fact that she doesn't know why people think that she's going to cut school budgets, because she has no intention of cutting school budgets. So the truth is, we have no idea what the state's going to do. In 4 to 6 weeks, we should get their budget. Then we'll have a good idea where we go with ours. We're still going to be faced with the same hurdles of everything. We have a 2% tax cap, and the cost of everything is going up more than 2% a year. That's just the reality of it. Anybody who's been to the grocery store knows that. So I think insurance is 8.5 is the estimate. BOCES is 3 is their preliminary estimate. Now they smooth it over 3 years, but it's still over 2%, and that is pretty much everything. Our cost for oil is more than 2% increase annually. Our cost for all of our services tends to be more than a 2% increase. So it does create, a situation where, we really have to be frugal in what we do. We are in we're in a good financial position. We're not in the position that some other districts are, where they're already talking about closing schools and accessing numerous people. So our goal for the year is to come up with a taxpayer-sensitive budget that supports all of the programs that we have. Now, when I say supports all of the programs that we have, everything doesn't always look, something might not look the way it did for the last 50 years. But it will support keeping the programs, all of the programs that we have. That's the goal in our budget, and our first run will include all of that. The only time where we eliminate things is if they don't run. If we have classes that kids don't sign up for, we don't run classes without kids in them. When we have teams that we don't have enough kids for, drama productions, things like, we never really run into that with any of our larger things like plays and, concerts and stuff like that. But, we do not run teams in certain years because we just don't have the population for them. Our smallest grade is now in 8th grade. It's only 39 students.
I thought kindergarten was 31.
Our kindergarten is the smallest in all of them, but now our smallest in the, junior high is now
okay. I'm
up
sorry.
here, yeah. District-wide, right now, our kindergarten is the smallest, and our pre-K is the smallest pre-K we've ever had. Now, that means that we're going to have a really small kindergarten next year, or we're going to have a lot of kids that have needs where they're in placements that are greater than what we have in our universal pre-K. Because those kids tend to come to us in kindergarten, not in pre-K, because we don't operate a special ed pre-K, we operate a universal pre-K. So, that we won't know until next year. Some of them we do know because they get CPSE services, but it looks like our incoming kindergarten, this current year's pre-K, may be the smallest we've ever had.
What kind of numbers?
Right now, it's the pre-K we are running is 18.
Ooh.
It's 18. We were set to have 2. We didn't have enough for 2.
I think they got it.
We staffed it to go up to 20. They do it 3 different ways. You can either have 2 people with 18 and 2 people with 18 in another one, or you can have one teacher and two aides with 20. Those are the guidelines. So you can go up to 20 in one room, and you put in 3 adults, 2 aides and 1 teacher.
But we don't run that pre-K, they run.
No, it's from Scope.
So
Scope,
that's-
we contract out for Scope to do it.
Did it used to be just kids that we used?
Yeah, the provider that was used prior to me getting here dropped us because they didn't have the numbers in it. They were only getting there were a lot more pre-K opportunities out here back then. There were a lot of home pre-Ks and just kids and churches and things like that. So, they didn't get enough kids to make it financially worthwhile for them. So they dropped us the year before I got here. I remember reading the letters about it 5 years ago. And that's when we called Scope and asked them to come in. Scope is the largest pre-K provider on the island and in I believe in the state, because they do Westchester also. So, and they're good, they're a good organization to work for because they're a non-for-profit. So, they tend to be very reasonable, and they'll run our programs. So whatever reading programs we use, whatever phonological or phonemic awareness programs we use in kindergarten, they'll use in pre-K. So this way our kids come out of a class where they're speaking the same language as our kindergarten teachers. And so they're very, they're very good in working with us in that regard. So it's very beneficial to us.
Can you remind us of the retirements this year? Do we know?
As of now, we have 2 that put in, Patty and Jim.
Patty
Right,
Millis, right, and Jim Sherrill.
Yeah.
Jim Sherrill, yeah.
Patty is the only one at the elementary?
I
Yeah,
believe so, yeah.
yeah.
So we may not have to replace her then?
We probably will, and I'll show you that in just a minute.
Okay.
Actually, if we want to move into the work session, which kind of relates to this. Can I use this clicker, Eric? It's all set up? Yep. It's on your, those papers I just gave you, and it's very abbreviated. It's abbreviated numbers, so these are 2005, Ellen O'Neill's first year here, and 2024-25, her last school year. So as you can see, we have 639 students as of yesterday, and we had 1,041 back in 2005. Our projection for 3 years, 2 years from now, when our current high school kids get up here, is 554. As of now, looking at our pre-K, we're under projected. But this is our projection as of now would be 554. So almost exactly like a half. Really almost like a 50% drop. These are elementary classes. I know someone asked for this in a prior presentation. So 2005, 2006, we had 25 sections of elementary school. We had 3 kindergarten, 4 first, 3 second, 4 third, 4 fourth, 3 fifth, 3 sixth, and then we had 1 self-contained class. And you're going to see a little bit of a theme in here. When you look at this year, we have 2 of everything, except we have 3 self-contained classes. Now, the percentage of special ed students on Long Island has almost doubled all over Long Island in the last 5 to 6 years, and the percentage of E&L students has also increased dramatically. Now, the reality is, it's more expensive to educate kids in a class when you have 8 kids, 9 kids, 10 kids in a class than when you have 22. Not to mention that typically you end up having more than 1 adult in those classes. So we have 3 self-contained classes in elementary school this year. So we have 17 sections, but if you were to just go full-size section to full-size section, it would be 24 and 14, 10 less full-size sections, which is the majority of your kids. And that is that drop that you saw on that last slide. Also changes that are important to look at. We had a technology teacher in 2005. We do not have one now. Art, we had 1.6, we had 1. PE, we had 2.5, we now have 2. Speech, we had 1.8, we now have 2. ESL, we had 1, and we have 2.5. Library, we had a half a librarian, we now have 1. General music, we had 1.5 teachers, and we now have 1. And math AIS, we had none back then, and we now have 0.48. So you look at some areas increased in how many teachers you need, even though our population has decreased, and other areas have decreased because our population decreased. The reality is, and you'll hear this at any conference that you go to, any educational conference in the United States, it is more expensive to educate kids now than it was 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, because what we are required to provide and the number of diagnoses that kids have create a scenario where it just takes a lot more adults to educate them. So, we have more special ed teachers in school districts all over Long Island than we had 20 years ago. We have more E&L teachers than we had 20 years ago. We have more behavioralists than we had 20 years ago. And we don't in Southold really deal with some of these things, but it's not uncommon to have a behaviorist for every 2 or 3 schools because of the behaviors that you deal with in some of your larger districts. We are able to manage it with our social worker and psychologist and our teachers because we have a dedicated group of people that do an excellent job. But it is significantly more expensive to educate children now than it was 20 years ago.
Do we have speech, or do we contract out for speech?
No, the speech teachers are ours.
Oh, I thought we contracted out for that.
We did at one point in time, years ago, for part, and then we had part, it was split in the past. It is frequently, well, it runs the gamut. It can be more expensive to contract out, and it's a lot less reliable to contract out. So the high school is a significantly harder.
Can I just mention one thing about that elementary thing? Maybe you could look into this. Patty may remember this. I believe that AIS position came about as a result of that new math that was every Common Core math that came out of the blue that nobody was prepared for, one of the new math things. And at the time, we were told it was going to be a temporary position, which I know often happens, and then they become, but it may be something we want to look at. Do we need to provide, and if we're providing it, are we not doing what we should be doing in the math? It's just one of those things I can recall
I'll get your answers for you.
from years ago, and I know with COVID, everything with,
Yeah, I don't know the history of the position, but I'll be happy to look into it.
Okay, thank you.
It hasn't been around that long,
I know.
but I'll look into the history of it. I know that you are required to have AIS math under certain circumstances. I don't know the guidelines for it off the top of my head.
AIS mean?
Academic intervention service, it's the same as reading. When a student scores at a certain level, you're required to provide them from grades 3 through 8, I believe it is. 3 through 12, really, but much of the high school stuff is provided right in your classroom.
I know it's always a position that we struggle to fill, and we get somebody
Yeah.
because they're looking for a full-time job, and,
I know we've had a number of years, because when we were over in where the Mac Lab is now, the business office, we had it then.
and that might have been when it, and then it went away, and then, I don't know, I just,
Yeah, I could go back and look.
I know when one of those new math programs came, the Common Core, like you say, are one of those that, they put out there before they gave us time to get ready for it.
That come around like
So I'll be
2007.
happy to look
Maybe,
at it.
yeah, that's,
And find
Okay.
out.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, so the high school is a lot more difficult to quantify because you don't have a section is a section is a section. So, there have been changes. We had a business teacher, we no longer have a business teacher. But we didn't have a full-time transition coordinator. We contracted out for like a 0.6. Now we have a full-time transition coordinator. So there are some ups and downs, in the high school, but it's nowhere near as easy to quantify as the elementary school is. Where the difference is in the last 5-6 years, and that's because our smaller sections have gotten up to the high school in the last 5 or 6 years, are 6 periods. So in 2018, we had 38 6 periods in the high school. The first year that we started to reduce.
I'm sorry, can you explain maybe for Tom's benefit what a 6 period
So a high
is?
school teacher's typical schedule is 5 periods. We pay them to do an extra period. And in many districts, if you do that 3 times, when you hit your 4th, you got to hire another teacher. Here, because we have such a hard time getting part-times and things like that, we utilize we utilize them a little bit more frequently than you might in some other places. And our people are excellent about it. We also have a 9-period day where they don't have a duty during the day, so they're able to do a 6 period and still have lunch prep and professional period. So either way, in 2018, we had 38 sixth period. We were paying 38 sixth period stipends, which is the equivalent of 7.5 teachers. Right now, this year, we have 23. And we added one for music because we have a split band person. So we're really, we had added two. One was music, and I forget the other one off the top of my head, but it was really down to like 21. So, but either way, the 15, that's the equivalent of 3 full teachers in the last 4 or 5 years in the high school that have been reduced, and that's because of our class sizes. You know, we used to run, every middle school teacher used to have 6 classes because we had 3 sections in 7th grade and 3 sections in 8th grade because we had 60 kids and 60 kids. Well, now we have 39 kids and 42 kids, so we run 2 and 2. You know, sometimes we run 2 and 3 depending on the offerings. The first year, we didn't really reduce a lot of 6 periods. What we did was we eliminated how many kids were in study halls. You know, we reduced the number of kids that were in study halls all day. You know, it wasn't uncommon that a student had 3 or 4 study halls. It wasn't uncommon that you had 20 kids in a study hall. You know, we've cut that down tremendously by, in the first years when we freed up time in people's schedules, we created new courses and new electives. We talked to our kids, we talked to our college connections and our high school counselors and our teachers, and these are all classes that have been added since 2018. You know, so these have all been put in since Terrence was there. And you'll notice on the bottom there's a bunch of middle school ones. Middle school students did not have any electives prior to this. They may have at some other time in history, but they did not when Terrence came in, and when I got here we didn't have any either. We started adding them. So now our middle school kids, rather than spending a couple periods a day or 3 periods a day in study hall, they have electives, and they're very well attended by the middle school kids. You know, so the impacts in the high school, fewer students in study hall classes, more student choice. You know, kids can be involved and they can sign up for classes that they didn't have options. You know, it gives us a more stable faculty. You know, this whole model, like you're not hiring .4s who then leave because they get a full-time job. You have 2 teachers that'll pick up the 6 period each, and then the next year they may not need it. It all depends on enrollment, and it does give you the opportunity to have a more stable faculty. You know, and then it gives us future opportunities, which we will talk about some here. You know, some we have used or tried to use, and some will hopefully have coming forward. So, shared programs that we have right now, athletics is shared between all 3 schools, districts. We share robotics now with all 3 districts. We have 4 Matatuck kids in our program this year for the first time. And I'm told they're fantastic. They told me, I went down and visited today with robotics because they had their reveal this weekend. So they're busy at building their first iteration of their robot. We have a shared music teacher, which we had not done here in the past, but it's working out quite well between us and Greenport. They're happy having the extra half a person, and it works out well in our schedule. And then we share 3 NJROTC instructors and the entire program. You know, there are different pieces, like, you know, we do drones at one school, we do, you know, they do different pieces of the program at different schools, and our kids go there, and their kids come here. And so these are 4 places where we are already sharing. You know, we have always shared expertise and resources when it comes to things that are going on. You know, we met about regionalization just last week. We meet about different things fairly regularly, and you know, so we've always shared on the fork that way. You know, as we shrink, there are probably more opportunities for us to share more programs, and that is where we get to the work session part of ours. We did. We tried to share AP Physics this year with Greenport. We couldn't align schedules. That is by far the most difficult part. You know, the most difficult part is that all 3 school districts on the North Fork use the same bus company. They use the buses more than once. Like if they do, say, 7 runs for us and 7 runs for Greenport, 7 runs for Matatuck, they don't use 21 buses. They might use 10 12 buses. And they do, they do the schools staggered. So aligning times creates a little bit of a difficulty because we wouldn't be able to get busing, and it's hard to get kids to different places. Matatuck started a woodworking program this year. We do have a student that's in it. It creates some challenges, and this will be part of our discussion and our opportunities. Theoretically, creating programs is absolutely wonderful.
Logistically, it's hard.
Excuse me?
Logistically, it's hard.
Logistically, it's hard, and financially, it's hard. Because to run, say, a woodworking program here in Southold, we have the facility, we could run the program. If we want the accreditation that we would get through BOCES, we would have to get a BOCES instructor, which means we would have to have 10 committed kids at the $17,000, $18,000 BOCES rate for us to not lose money.
What if you don't do the accreditation process and just offer it as an elective course?
We do that, and that we do already, but you have kids that want to come out, and you have employers that want kids to have certain, they want them to have a certain level of competence when they come out to hire them. So there are certain programs like barbering and cosmetology, and, we could put together an elective for it, but our kids aren't going to get hired like they do out of the BOCES program, because they come out with a license, for that program. And so, if you run your program at like 5, like Matatuck had to this year, it runs a loss, or everybody pays more to come. So there are difficulties, not just logistically with it. There are difficulties, some of it is we tried to run welding this year because we have a full welding studio here. We weren't looking for certifications or accreditation or anything like that, but we wanted our kids to know how to weld when they left, those that want to go into that field. And we had 2 kids in the district that signed up for it, so we couldn't run the course. And one was iffy. So we had one definite and one iffy. We brought a welder in, the kids were out back by the shed welding with them all day. They did a fantastic job. I went out and watched for about a half an hour. It was fascinating. And, then when we posted the class as an elective, no one signed up for it. So we could, can you run it with one? It's tough to run a class with one, every teacher teaches 5 classes. It's hard to run a class with 1 or 2 kids, So that is part of it, The opportunity has to be met with the need and the desire for people to be in it. Now, it's not uncommon to run classes. We run classes here, electives. We will run them smaller in the first year. When we run an elective, we don't have the same cut point in year 1 as we will in future years. But in year 2, we'll have a cut point. So that gives you a year for your kids, the 5 or 7 kids that take your elective. Like if we had 5 kids take welding this year, then what we would have said was, those 5 kids need to be telling everybody how great welding is.
Right.
So they're all signing up for it.
The word's
That's just
out.
really the way it works.
If we
And
get
that's
them
not uncommon.
3 or 4 from Greenport.
I ran electives at half of my cut point in prior districts
That's the
too.
logistics of
That's
it.
not an
But we've
uncommon
always
thing to
made
do.
well,
You
not
have
a
to
ton of
build. It
classes
doesn't,
with 1 or
you know,
2 as
you
a
don't start up
start.
here.
Your daughter,
right,
didn't
you know.
Caitlin do
So
it?
that is not a, that's not an uncommon occurrence, and that's not something that's out of the ordinary.
Oh, maybe that time.
You don't run it at 1, you'd run it at 4, because you'd be hoping to get 8. A class like welding, you can't run with 20 kids anyway. No. Like it's a 6, 8 kid class,
Right.
with students. And I have to tell you, the young ladies were the better welders. The welder that came let them weld.
More patience.
They had a much steadier hand, and they were better than
At that
the
age.
boys.
Yeah, patience,
without
patience.
And their welding line was really much better.
Sure.
So,
Attention to detail.
I'm
It's like
hoping
can running.
that we can get them back
Boys
in
out.
again this year. They came in from the Ironworks place out in Greenport.
Yep.
Somebody here knew, maybe Jason or Matt, one of them knew him. And they got them to come in, and they were out there in the nice weather and welding. And so I'm hoping they do it again and we get another run at it, because I think it's an absolutely fantastic course to offer. We will reach out to Greenport and Matatuck and let them know that we're trying to run a course in welding and see if they are interested in having students. Because it's not a BOCES course, financially, the biggest issue would be the cost.
While I understand the logistics, like Brian mentioned, with sharing, and this is no disrespect meant to Matatuck at all, I think you have to eliminate a third district and focus on two, because we've made it work with Greenport in the past. I know 40 years ago we did it. It wasn't an abundance of classes, and like Brian mentioned, his son went down there for chemistry class.
Yeah.
Because you can't do the beginning of the day and the end of the day with the buses, but
Yeah.
you're talking about half a dozen kids going. It's a minibus situation too, which we, I believe, have our own.
We still have them, right?
Yeah, we have large and small.
And I know it's not easy, but we can't obviously run classes with 3 or 4 or 5 kids in them all the time, and I don't want to see our kids not have the opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to, like this year, like now in January, reach out to Greenport and say, what are your kids looking for? What do you have that we don't have, and what do we have that you don't have? And pick one to start, and,
So we
I
started
think we still
out-
offer it to Matituck.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not-
And it's on them to get their kids here.
right,
Certain things
right.
we would offer to all.
I'm thinking of
You know,
going
I
though,
think-
too.
I
I'm
think-
thinking about
I think
logistics.
distance-wise, we're closer to Greenport than we are
We've
to
had
Matituck.
conversations with them already. I can tell you that they did not want their traveler kids for physics.
Greenport didn't, or Matituck didn't, Greenport didn't?
The report did not want to travel their kids for
I'm
physics.
surprised at that.
They're working out a deal where Matituck will travel a teacher for physics, possibly. You know, that, and again, look, that'd be the most desirable for me too.
Yeah, that is
I would prefer to-
one as opposed to 10 or
Right,
whatever.
right, right. But can we make that work? Can we, I
We're
mean,
gonna, we're gonna talk about it. In our schedule, we could not travel a teacher because our teacher had too many classes already.
but what about the instance where we have a junior, senior high school science teacher retiring this year? Is there a way to reach out to see if we can have said teacher from another district replace them for those classes? I think we have to think outside the box.
And we do, just so that you know, every section that we, like every retirement we have, we review, like we did with music. And when we reviewed music, what we found was we didn't need a full-time person. We have had that for 4 elementary positions since I've been here,
Right,
plus one that we accessed, so 5, actually. You know, so we do look at every one of them. When it comes to like a science,
I know it's more difficult.
well, it's also that, you know, you need, you would need 4 part-time teachers to replace 1 science teacher, because they teach multiple different
Yeah.
sections. You know, you can't put them together, you can't put 2 or 3 different science classes together.
Unless you get that teacher that's certified in science and something else. I know it doesn't
You still
occur
can't-
often.
You still can't put them together because you can't do 2 curriculums in a year in 1 class. Like if I'm teaching earth science, I can't do living environment at the same time. They're 2 completely different
Right.
parallel, curriculums. So I might have a cert for both, but I can't teach both at the same time. You know, so those classes can't be combined, whereas like in elementary school, you can combine classes. But, 4th grade is 4th grade, 5th grade is 5th grade. You can combine different classes. So it's, we, to answer your question, we do look at it. And we look at, I actually, when we started doing some of this stuff, I met with Terrence to look at, what each person's schedule is. And there are cases like we looked at orchestra, and when we looked at orchestra, there was no way that we could have reduced it. It couldn't be reduced when our person retired. When we looked at band, it could be. There are times when we look at it and it can be reduced and we can still provide all the same courses in the same way, similarly to the way that we did in the past. So we do continue to do that. I believe, and this is the discussion part, I believe the sharing of resources is something that as we all continue to shrink, will continue to be more and more important. Greenport's not shrinking, by the way.
I know.
Greenport
It's
is, I
not wrong.
believe, larger than us right now.
And it's not just Hispanic.
By a few kids. I spoke to Ryan yesterday, and I think that there are a few kids larger than we are.
I believe you're right,
They're in the
yeah.
mid-600s.
At least one, right?
Well, possibly. They're in the mid-600s, 650 or something like that, and we're at like 639. Greenport has not been shrinking. There are a few other districts on the island that aren't shrinking. There are some that are even growing, like Riverhead. And Matituck is shrinking dramatically. Their drop is,
Bigger than ours?
faster than ours.
Ours was more gradual, I
Yeah, it's
believe.
faster than ours. Theirs has been faster than ours, and it came later than ours. Like they're bringing in classes, they're exiting classes of 200 and bringing in classes of 80. 90, 100. I don't know their exact numbers, but I know that their drop has been,
Drastic.
it's been drastic, and it came a little later than ours. Ours was prepared for well here, for many years, for a lot of years before I ever got here, people prepared for it. Like, there were 2 or 3 elementary, teachers that retired that were not replaced prior to my getting here. So the 3 or 4, the 4 that I didn't replace or accessed them on, there were 2 or 3 of those done prior to me getting here. So we were very lucky that our attrition, because of the model that's used at the high school with the additional period in people's schedules, and because so many of them were being used because of our size, and because of just the timing of retirements, our change did not cause like what you had in Amityville this year, where they gave 40 teachers pink slips and said, we know you're all tenured, but you don't have a job. And it also creates a fiasco because you have recall rights. So for 7 years, you have to recall every one of those teachers prior to hiring anybody else for any position that they are in or that they're certified for. And it's a nightmare because I did it. We had 68 in 1 year in a prior district because of financial issues. And it becomes almost unmanageable, and it's certainly not a good thing for morale. And we have dedicated, hardworking teachers that do an excellent job, and the fact that we've been able to right-size our teaching population, because it's not really reducing, it's right-sizing it based on the number of kids we have. The fact that we've been able to right-size our teaching population with retirements really makes it a lot more palatable, because it doesn't impact people as negatively. So, there are things that we have talked about as districts that we could certainly look into. Things like, sharing facilities, men.
We'd love to do a different schedule during the day. Maybe the schedule that we use, the 6-period schedule's not as effective as it was when it started however many years ago. I didn't Gamber bring that up, or 9-period schedule.
Yeah.
But I mean, are there different ways we can look to use our day for our students? I know it's the elementary is a little bit different, obviously.
Yeah.
I know that it's kind of drastic, but
I mean, I think that we're open to looking at anything. I could talk to Terrence about it. I don't know. I mean, I know districts that have 8-period days that are a little bit longer, and they're 8 periods. Most of them are going to 9, because it provides your kids with opportunities. AP. I mean, the biggest thing are your AP classes.
they're getting less time in those classes where you need the time.
I mean, but you leave here with 5 AP classes, then you are 3.5 semesters in college, 3.5 years in college, and you're out. There are kids, I mean, one of my son's friends graduated in 3, and he never doubled up a class because he had 10 APs when he graduated high school. He took his first AP as a freshman, and he took like 5 his senior year. He had taken 4 or 5 before that. So that's a whole year of college. It makes a difference. To me personally, I would prefer to be in college for another year.
And you also have to think about the kids that choose not to go to college.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's that fine line.
And there is, and I have to tell you, I think that we offer a wide variety of courses here that provide for kids that are career bound, and then we also provide the support where we have a transition coordinator that works with our career bound kids and our special needs students equally, so that it really does, there are a lot of places where it's academic and that's it. We have a phenomenal tech department. We offer, agricultural courses and things that just are not offered in other places. And they're extremely well attended and they're very well taught by our teachers. So when it comes to looking at scheduling, I can ask Terrence to meet with the other principals and look at what they're doing and see if there's anything there. Sharing of resources is something that I think is going to become more prevalent between districts because of 2 reasons. One, everybody is shrinking a little bit, and financially, I think that whether it comes this year or next year, the year after, there's going to be a financial hit in the state. And I think the other reason is that we have the technology to do it now in ways that we couldn't do it in the past.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is Zoom or something.
Yeah.
Is that feasible?
Yeah. There's conversations about it. There are collective bargaining units that get involved,
Yeah.
all of this is subject to collective bargaining. So you can't just decide you're gonna do something different outside of the scope of what your contract allows you to do. Like, all of those things have to be agreed upon. Some of them are agreed upon for good reasons, because it keeps people working. Others, we've shared a very good relationship with our collective bargaining units, and they've always been very good about, doing things that are beneficial for kids and for their group and for our community. So I would expect that we would just continue to have good conversations with them to try to do that. But again, it's not as easy as it always seems to be, to be able to do something like that, you have to.
That would cut out some busing issues.
Yes, it would. Yeah, it would. And there's been conversations about it. We had, this was the topic of one of our East End superintendents meetings, and when I'm the East End, one of the East End cluster chairs for the superintendents. It's from Montauk all the way into, to Riverhead. Riverhead is not part of it, and then all the way out to us. That's the East End cluster. And we meet as superintendents, and Fisher's Island, and all of the islands, quite honestly, are ours. And we have these conversations, and one of them was about, utilizing Zoom and having, doing things like, none of us can offer Mandarin Chinese, or maybe one does. I can't remember who it was, but maybe one district did. But Mandarin Chinese is offered in a lot of districts on Long Island, especially in Nassau County. And we've even had kids sit for some of these Regents exams. They've done summer courses in the city, and they've sat, whether it was here or in my prior district where we didn't offer Mandarin Chinese either. If you Zoom a kid in to a class from Jericho where they're doing Mandarin Chinese, they can do it sitting right in Southold High School. The logistics of it, again, when the class starts, when it ends, things like that, have to all be worked out, but those might present opportunities that we don't even know about yet.
Right.
The same as American Sign Language. American Sign Language is offered as a foreign language, and it counts as a foreign language in multiple districts. We offered 9 sections of it in my prior district. 4 in one high school, 5 in the other. And 3 Village offers it, Colmac offers it, there's a lot of places that offer it. And, it is a language that, and it's a very useful language. We have kids that, they become interpreters at the UN immediately. So, and I've worked with them because I've had hearing impaired kids, and they put what they call a shadow, stands next to you and signs everything as you talk. And we don't have the ability to offer it size-wise, because if we had one section, no one's coming out here for one class.
When you have districts large, when you were in your previous district, which is so large and has multiple buildings, did they utilize like the Zoom kind of?
We didn't, because when I came out here was when the pandemic started, and that's when
just
Zoom
learning that, yeah.
became
Okay.
something that people use. We didn't have any meetings by Zoom. We didn't have any,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I remember
yeah.
interviewing, you're like
Yeah. It's
12
like an
feet
online
apart.
course.
Yeah.
Everything, yeah.
Basically, it's like an online course.
Exactly,
All of
yeah.
your courses
I like that
now,
one better
almost-
than Zoom, almost.
I would say 70% of the graduate courses for teachers in New York State,
It's online.
including my 2 kids, are all online. They don't.
Mike's taking online courses in
yeah.
South Carolina.
Is it?
Yeah,
Kids
one of
go
the courses is
to,
online.
kids go to college and they take, they get up and go to 3 classes and take 2 online.
Yeah.
They sit in their dorm room and take 2 online. The dorm room that you're paying for, they could be in their room at home.
Yeah.
So, that's the world that we live in, but it wasn't the world we lived in before.
Right.
So I don't have a great deal of experience with it,
Post-COVID.
mostly because no one has a great deal of experience with it. It just wasn't really done frequently, just like telehealth. And these things that are common now, my eye exams are given to me by a doctor in California. I go in and a tech does all the tests, and then I see a guy or a gal's face from California, and they tell me what the tests mean. No different than if a person walked in, because the doctors don't give you the tests, the techs do. And they poof things on my eyeballs, and they do all the stuff they do, and then the doctor comes in and tells me exactly what they see. Happens to be on the other side of the country.
Right.
That didn't exist, 5-6 years ago. It's become, it's a different world. So we don't necessarily have answers for these things because they didn't take place. We've had discussions as superintendents on the island about opportunities that we can provide kids that we really couldn't provide kids for in the past. Now we're in the process of trying to work out the logistics of it and getting people to agree to them, and that's really the point that we're at. I do see really great opportunities in those areas. Online courses, when I took 2 online courses when I was younger, and they were all just reading. You didn't get taught online. Everything was
It was
posted.
discussion, posting, yes.
It was
I
it was
took a
posting, yeah.
graduate level
Yeah,
course.
so did I. And they were, they were the hardest classes I took, because you were reading 200 pages a week,
I would have a difficult time with that, I think.
especially if you don't have an
Video,
attention span.
There wasn't a
Yeah.
teacher.
No, there was, nothing was ever live.
It was
I would have a
conversation.
real hard time with
So,
that.
Dr. Maury, you had mentioned, right, eventually there could be a hit, right, from state aid. Is that tied to, like, the changes that they're proposing, like foundation aid, or?
So, the Rockefeller report came out. Rockefeller Institute did an extensive 315-page report. One of the things they said in that report was, they believe the whole foundation aid formula should be changed, partially because they don't believe wealth. The foundation formula takes in enrollment, wealth, a bunch of different factors, and wealth is measured the same way as it was 50 years ago. And it's not accurate, because you have people that are living in houses that have doubled in value, that they still make the same income they used to make, and they're really not wealthy. When they sell their house, they'll get, this big chunk, but then they'll spend it buying another one because there's no affordable houses anywhere anyway. So like one of their recommendations were to really redo the entire formula and look at it completely differently. Now, the initial hits that I spoke about that we expected this year are the ones that were proposed last year, and that was based on mostly foundation aid loss. We would have a large foundation aid loss because we're being, our foundation aid is based on that enrollment that you saw from 2005, closer to then. It's a little later than that, but they have had what they call the hold harmless provision. So if your enrollment went down, your foundation aid would never go down. It won't go up, but it won't go down. And that's where we are at. We're in the hold harmless buffer. Now, the good part for Southold is that our foundation aid was never, our aid was never tremendous. Brentwood's aid is like $260 million a year. So if they were to have a 3% aid cut, it would just be devastating. I don't know what Sachem's is now, but when I was there, it was $1 million a day, school day, 180 million about. If their foundation aid is cut by the same percentage that ours is, they're going to have a $12-13 million shortfall, where we're going to have, a $300,000 shortfall. Now, are we smaller, and it's not relative. 12 million and 300,000 cannot be made up the same way. 300,000 is detrimental
A
to a small
percentage to our,
district.
right.
It's,
For them,
Right, but you could manage it.
yes.
Yeah.
catastrophic.
They have,
in some way.
our combined wealth ratio out here is significantly higher than many other places. We're in the 3s, where, many up island districts are 0.8, 0.91. So what we were originally getting was significantly lower than what they were getting anyway. I don't believe it's accurate, because the combined wealth ratio is not really a good formula for wealth. If you live in a mixed community, like, say, Riverhead is a perfect example. They have very expensive homes on the water that drive their combined wealth ratio up. So Riverhead doesn't get the aid they really should get, because their combined wealth ratio is higher. New Rochelle was that way too, where I grew up. Huntington is that way. Those $10 million houses on the water in Huntington Harbor, they drive your combined wealth ratio up, and that gives them an unfair, and I believe that's why the Rockefeller Institute suggested that they use a different way. I do believe that no matter what, our population has cut in half. We would end up with some sort of cut, no matter what formula they come up with. The governor has recently come out and said, She believes that the Rockefeller Institute has done a fine job, but they need more time to really look at this stuff and come up with better recommendations. Now, if it's an about turn from what we had in the past, quite honestly. Like, what we had in the past was we're cutting this now. I don't know why the change, I don't know if the change will stay, I hope it stays, because I happen to agree with her. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the Rockefeller report. You know, I've skimmed through it and I've read the executive summary. I think there are some really good points in there that will help education. There were areas that they believe, like EV buses, they think should be funded by the state. They don't think districts should bear the cost of EV buses. God bless you. You know, EV buses aren't just buying all new buses. You got to put in the whole infrastructure. You got to put in all the chargers. You got to put in all these different things. And the buses cost twice as much as regular buses. So, you know, like, there were a lot of things in that report that I thought were good. What I believed, and what I think most educators believed, was they were going to cherry pick what they wanted out of there and put it in place this year and then move forward. They don't seem to be doing that. You know, they really don't seem, at least by her statements in the last month or two, they don't seem to be looking to say, well, we like that one because it cuts this, and we like that. It looks like they're looking at it holistically, and they want to really try to solve some of these problems that are long-standing. And, you know, you can't keep mandating things. Like, we have to have EV buses and air conditioning in all our schools in the next couple of years. We don't have the energy on Long Island to do that right now. We've spoken to the electric companies, and they've told us point blank that we, you know, they can't even, they won't answer us because they don't want to say no, but they've said we're looking to see how we can generate that much electricity for you.
So like, with the EV buses, you know, how many are they mandating you have?
So we can continue to use the buses that we have until
They die.
2035 or when they die, something like that. I don't remember the exact date. I think it's 2035.
What we have.
What we have.
Yeah.
And the bus companies, it's been very interesting. We've reached out to many of the local bus companies and asked them, and it has ranged from some of the bus companies, one on the South Fork that said, we're just going to close.
Can't afford it.
No, they can't afford it. It has ranged from that to, we don't know what we're going to do, we're looking at it. So we don't really know what will happen when it comes to the the districts that own buses, and we own 4 buses, so we're not in a position like Riverhead that runs 110 buses a day. You know, they run 110 buses a day, and their buses get a tremendous more distance than ours. So they,
Geographically.
yeah, so they have to cycle out much faster, because you can't run buses like you can a car until it dies.
Yeah.
You know, DOT says, you got enough miles on that,
Yeah.
you know, get a new
Switch
one.
out.
And if they don't certify it, you can't use it. So, you know, we had to get rid of buses in my prior district because they faded and they weren't yellow enough. You know, yeah, like, they have all these different reasons. We could have spent, $10,000 painting a bus that was gonna last another year, or we could just go get a new one. You know, the bus companies give you $2,500 for your, $250,000 bus, and you take it because there's nothing else to do with them. You know, they're gonna collect dust and rust in your backyard, you know.
They go to the racetrack.
Yeah, they go to the racetrack, we're painting one that we're gonna use as a school store at some of our games. Like, you can come up with some creative things, but if you're, say, Riverhead, where you're doing 10 buses, 15 buses a year, like, they have enough buses that they gotta do 10 a year at least, if they're cycling correctly. You don't have something to do with 10 buses a year. You're just giving them back to the company and they're running usually,
Can't
like,
see how that's gonna work, the EV.
so the EV,
Maybe,
All this green
Yeah.
climate stuff.
I mean, like all these bus companies, they're not gonna,
starts 2025. After that, you can't buy gas buses, you're not allowed to.
We're in 2025.
Yeah, starts the end of this year. Now,
Okay.
Starting in the city, you're not allowed to put gas in any new apartment buildings.
really,
Everything has to be electric and battery.
battery and electric, and the batteries, this,
Project buildings
Yeah.
are gonna
My
have
father said, don't
electric
ever,
stoves and battery
my-
storage units in the basement.
Oh, so that's gonna be a bigger problem.
That's not
We
gonna
were
be a
told-
problem at all.
yeah,
we
no,
were told,
that should be.
don't buy houses with electric.
so much of the
vehicles.
difficult part is that,
Looking for houses or.
we don't know what they're gonna do. You know what I mean? And even just with the statements that have been made publicly out of the governor's office in the last 4 weeks, it's almost like a complete about-face from last year. Last year, there was a hard line. These are the cuts we're gonna make, and we're gonna make them now. Now, we all believed that they would pull back on it,
Her budget.
but we all prepared for them not to pull back on it.
That's the year.
The statements this year have been, I don't know why people would think I would cut educational aid. We're not looking to do that at all. And Rockefeller, they rushed that report from them, and that company did a great job. It's a very extensive, very thorough report. But it didn't give them enough time to really delve into what you should do with what they found. And she has said that, she believes they should delve into what they should do with what they found. So, the hope is that this year, there's not a huge change, and that when they do make changes in the future, they take into consideration some of these things. We now, starting next year, if your instructional areas are above a certain degrees, you either have to turn on the air conditioning, turn on certain degrees, you got to do something to mitigate it. So you can open your doors, turn on fans. Another certain degrees, it's got to be air conditioning or remove your kids. So we are very lucky in that most of our space is air conditioned.
Right.
There are some districts where they have 10% of their rooms air conditioned, which means 90% of their rooms. We don't have a lot of days. I think they looked at it last year. They said there were 5 or 6 days that this would have impacted. In the city, it's going to be a bigger issue if the city is bound by it.
But the
you know.
city, the Big Five, they get excused from
They
all
get
of the
excused
things
from
that
a
we
lot of
have
these
to
things. I
follow.
don't know if they're excused from that one.
It'd be interesting to see, right?
know.
Don't they usually get excused
They
from
get excused from many of the
lots of the
things.
stuff that?
They don't do foundation aid. They don't do, they don't do many of the things that we do.
Is the report easily accessible online, or could you email it?
Yeah,
to
but
us?
I
he
can
did.
have,
I think he
I
did.
emailed it to you a
He did
while ago,
email
but
it.
I can, I'll
In our
get it for you.
update, probably
A while,
December,
it's,
I'll look back.
it's like
if you
300
want,
pages or something like
no,
that.
mine I think has notes in it, because I have a copy on my
No,
desk.
I'll look back if if there's a link in there.
If not, I'll make sure you get one this week.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a very good report. Like, it really is very thorough, very well done. It's not one-sided. There are times where they specifically say the state needs to do this better and fund this better. And then there are times where they say you need to figure out, like, doing a hold harmless for 15 years wasn't a good idea. I don't think it was a good idea. I know that there are some superintendents that would probably lash me for saying that, but as our enrollment changes, and as our communities change, and as our population and demographics change, they should have changed.
The funding should
Yeah, they
change
should have
as well.
changed the way they looked at this. There are some districts that are getting way too much money, and there's some districts not getting enough. And the problem is, you become reliant on it. So it doesn't really matter to me whether they did it right or wrong. Just taking it away is not the answer, because districts have become reliant on it.
COVID money.
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
made your agreements. The districts that were using COVID money to pay teachers and things like that, they excessed multiple teachers last year.
Yeah.
That's why I was so leery. We had $2.5–3 million between the two things.
And I'm still afraid they're going to come after us for it at some point.
We could have funded teachers, but
So
we.
they were so happy to take that shore.
Yeah.
They were so happy to
Yeah,
take that power
yeah,
plant
yeah,
money,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden, we can't have this
Gosh, I
in our
remember
backyard.
that.
Yep.
Shut it down? Okay, well, we gotta take that money out.
Yes,
In the report where they made some recommendations for state funding certain things,
Yeah.
did they recommend where that funding should come from?
no. They said the state. They didn't say local taxpayers, they said
Oh,
the state.
they didn't mention that
No,
part in
but
parentheses.
they didn't. But I think that the governor has made, I think she made some comments in the last couple weeks about the fact that she would like that group to look at it and make more extensive, thorough recommendations on how to do things. The statements that, I didn't hear them directly, but the statements that were shared with me that she has made about utilizing that report are very encouraging to me. The Rockefeller Institute is a very professional. They will come out with really good recommendations about what should be funded and how you should fund it, and that is what I've heard that has come out recently. Again, it's a departure from what we've heard in the past, so it's new, and I don't know where it'll end up, but I'm hopeful for it. Like I said, there was a lot of really good stuff in the Rockefeller report. When it comes to regionalization, I know going back and forth. I'm going to share with you, I'll share with you in the update, but this is, is an open topic type subject. We were going to neither opt out or opt in. Ingerman says you can't do that. The state's not giving that option. And their recommendation is that if we are not sure that we want to be in, we should opt out. They believe that we'll be able to opt back in later, but probably not be able to opt out later. So I'll share all the detail from that in the update with you this week. I sent them a letter that said we want to do both, and he said, well-written, great idea, they're not going to let you do it. That's what Chris told me.
So
Which,
there's no downside in opting out, though.
I don't think there's any
You don't
downside in
lose
it,
funding or anything like that.
not that they've shared with us.
Okay.
And that's the thing, they haven't shared with us. I asked it at I asked it from the BOCES superintendent, who was up in Albany just a couple days before, and she said, I believe you'll be able to do this in the future to opt out. I don't believe you'll be able to opt back in, and we've not been given any indication that it's tied to funding or anything like that, but we've also not been told it won't be. That's what my concern was, is that,
Be able to opt.
You just said the opposite of what you
Just
said.
the opposite, so.
you won't be able to opt out later, but
Okay,
you will
okay.
be able
That's
to.
what you said
They
initially. Yeah,
believe
yeah, yeah.
we'll be able to opt back in.
That's what you say, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem is they haven't defined what regionalization is. If regionalization is sharing resources and doing the things that we're talking about doing already and that we already do, I'm all for it. It's wonderful. If regionalization is forced consolidation, then I'm not for it, because consolidation is a local decision. The people that live in this community have to decide whether they want to consolidate with somebody else after you guys decide whether you want to put that up to them or not.
Well, and as we discussed, unless they change the rules of consolidation, and are they going to go back and review those and change those, then.
They're offering a
It's not likely to
tremendous.
happen.
There's a lot of big things that you gotta think
There's
about.
tax implications.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
that's,
There's winners and
so the
losers.
two things
Yeah.
that keep districts
Which is
from
why Southampton and
consolidating.
Southold hasn't passed
yeah.
it
Right.
after 3 or 4 attempts.
There's a number that have tried to consolidate on the island, both in Nassau and in Suffolk, for many years. And your local beliefs and what people think they're gonna have to give up if they change their school color, if they change their school mascot or whatever, that's one. And then the second one is your tax base, because two groups' tax bases are never really the same. So when you look at one group's tax base that's higher and one's lower, when they consolidate, this is what's gonna happen. This one will come down a tiny little bit and this one will go up a whole lot. So you have a very hard time in getting people to vote for those
Right.
types of things.
And then when you have
Mm-hmm.
districts within, well, not districts, zip codes within that,
Yeah.
that tuition their students
Yeah.
to, like East Marion Orient and New Suffolk to us and that kind of thing, it's going to be skewed as to who's getting a benefit and who's not getting a benefit. I don't see
A
it.
lot of decisions.
Yeah.
Many,
A lot of
yeah,
big decisions.
Now, there is a lot of money on the table, and this is what gets people very excited. In my opinion, how should I word this? So there is a lot of funding for consolidation. Up millions. Ours could be close to $18, $19 million over 15 years, but then it ends. It's not, they don't give you the money forever. They give you the money, and then in a certain period of time, the money stops coming. You get funded for a certain period of time. So let's just say they give you $15 million over 15 years. In 15 years, you're going to be $1 million short in your budget if you've been spending it every year, which is what you're going to do, I think the purpose of it is so that you can build and you can do these things that you might need to do if you consolidate.
Initially.
If you're consolidating because you're shrinking and you're not building and you're not doing those things, then what you're doing is spending that money in your budget. And then eventually it ends. So as much as you look at the big number that is put in front of you for consolidation, it looks great. I don't know if long-term, I think there would need to be a lot of long-term planning for someone to make a good decision. A lot of times you have people look, 15 years, I'm not gonna be working. So, so some people don't look 15 years down the road when they're not gonna be answering the question.
Right.
To me, that's our obligation,
That's why you can't make a crazy decision on it,
Yeah.
because,
You know.
most of us won't be here.
15 years down the road, half our teachers won't be working.
That's right.
That's just so, but, it's your obligation to look at it and say, hey, 15 years down the road, that's gonna drop
So you have
off.
to educate the people.
What do we do?
Yeah,
We're gonna,
Yeah.
if we do this, we're gonna dump this
Yeah.
it's gonna be a problem later on.
problem on you.
Yeah,
And if
it's
somebody
not
moves
that-
out here,
yeah.
every time, they're not gonna know if,
It's
as
not
they
that it
move
can't
out
be
here.
done, but you just need to make sure that you need to make sure you plan for all those different things. If that's something that the community truly wants to do, you have to plan for it accordingly, where you decrease that spending over 15 years so that at the end, you don't need any of it.
Right.
And then it's like getting $1 million bonus the last year, but you don't need it, you know? Like, there needs to be that fiscal planning to make sure that you financially are not left short at the end. There are districts that see that as a way to close a gap.
It's almost like you have to take that money and put it in a separate pie.
Yeah?
Like,
I don't
just-
think you
Yeah.
can pass the tax disparity.
I don't think so.
I don't know if you'll ever get
In-
past
In
that.
our
never get
case,
past
in
that.
our case with all of the voters, that would, it take, one easement.
We'd be all right, but
Yeah.
the two on the other side of us would go.
Well, yeah,
Like you said.
even
Yeah.
the ones at tuition would really,
Yeah.
You know, like you said, the hard part too is, you know, the education and the awareness and, you know, getting people to understand the issue and, you know, from tonight, we're kind of thin, so, you know, where do we start? I mean, is it civic leaders, is it other, you know, elected officials in the town? You know, how do you get this word and, you know, start building alliances, get an understanding so this voice can get resonated? Because, like you said, 15 years seems a far cry away, but like you said, it's real compressed time.
Well, the 15 years would be if you decide to,
If we did,
Yeah,
like
if you
I said,
choose to
if
consolidate,
this
you know.
decision is eventually gonna hit us, and how do we, you know, without a direct appeal to the public, which, you know, we should continue.
Yeah.
What other, you know, groups within our community should we start having these discussions with?
it's a good question. I mean, the civic groups would be ones, you guys would know them better than me.
it's hard though, because the civic groups are, like, there's Matatuck civic groups, so that's Matatuck, right?
Yeah.
And then there's.
That's the problem.
That's the
yeah.
third, that's
The
the
overlap-
third
overlap.
cog in the
Yeah,
wheel, is
that-
the
that-
identity,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
The identity loss, or the identity
Yep.
merge, whatever you want to call it. you
Yep.
know? Listen, I mean, my kids happen to play shared sports here, and it was a nightmare,
yeah,
you know?
yep. You know, and it's becoming more and more necessary, you know,
Yeah.
sharing of sports, because we can't field teams.
Sharing of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, in the beginning, it
So,
was because.
I don't have a great
Matatuck
answer
hosted
for your
it, and
question.
they were
It'd be
called
nice- it
Matatuck.
would
It's a good
just be
question.
nice if
One that,
our girls' team could host
you know,
something, since we are the district in the middle of it.
At some point, we should get the stakeholders in the room and just, you know, like you said, have the discussion. It's always been this way in the North Fork, right? We consider ourselves the North Fork. We don't divide ourselves hamlets, districts, right? We think of ourselves as this entity. And yeah, there's little smaller tribes in that, but how do we get this word out? And, you know, even if it does bleed over into other districts, just so the conversation is started amongst everyone.
about consolidation.
Well, consolidation, regionalization,
Yeah.
again, just the dwindling enrollment,
this
you know,
on
the impact on the community, because it's, again, we're preparing our students, you know, to become adults and hopefully, you know, stay in the community, but, you know, how do we let people know, if we can't get them here to the meeting, how do we take this show on the road to just give, you know,
Yeah, I
bring
don't
to
know.
them the issues that, you know, we're concerned about? I mean, do we start with, like, you know, local officials, the town, county officials, start having those discussions with them about it? And especially at the state level too, you know, Assembly and State Senate, they're gonna have impact on, but if we can't bring people here, how do we get out into the community and start, you know, talking to them about it? Even if it's going to their meetings and taking a portion of our, you know, their time to have that discussion. Yeah. I think it merits it, maybe not now, because it's still, you know, in its infant stage, but
Yeah.
at some point in
But
time.
in the future.
Yeah, in the future, as this develops and there's more of a definition of what these terms mean, and, yeah, what the impact, and
Yes.
then we're getting close to decision time, I think, you know, if we can't get them here, I think we need to start going to them, just to raise
I
awareness.
can try to look at what, when we say them, I'll try to figure
Sure,
out.
I mean, who them is,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can
if
figure
we
out
could
what
start
them means.
defining that and then figure out, because I think we're gonna have to have a resonating voice, so that,
Yeah.
you know, again, we could get swept in the tide of, hey, this sounds like a great idea, without thinking of the long-term implications and impacts. down the road.
Thank you. So, any other questions or thoughts on possible sharing of resources?
We just have to make it happen somehow, I think. We just have to make it happen. It was a struggle in the other areas that it's now successful at, so I just think
I think the Zoom stuff is probably the easiest to start with. you
that's the
know.
most
just have to
difficult because
Get
of
over the
the,
collective bargaining.
right.
Well, that, but I mean, as far as transportation, and then you gotta, you can sort out the classes that you can and can't do.
can't
Obviously, you
imagine.
can't do welding over Zoom, and you
Right,
can't,
right,
you know,
right, right.
there's certain things
Collective-
you can and can't,
A collective bargaining agreement would be cheaper than busing. You know,
Oh, absolutely. I
but like
see.
you said, hands-on classes
But
like
talking
tech
about
and
it, that's the
welding.
easiest, I would think.
And like I said, our groups, our collective bargaining groups have always been open to having good, honest conversations.
Sure.
You know, what the outcome of any of them would be,
It's gonna
I
cost you
can't
nothing
tell
to
you.
talk.
you know,
What
they've
about the
always.
neighboring districts? How are they making out?
You know, I don't know. I can't answer for them, really.
Do they still have their?
They haven't chosen.
They're in the process of picking. I heard they're down to finalists.
They were down to finalists 2
Is
months
he
ago.
gone?
I know. Who?
Ryan Case is the acting superintendent.
Ryan is the acting superintendent.
Still,
Marlin is the superintendent in Elmont.
Marlon left at the end of the year, like in
Ryan Case
June.
from here?
Yes.
He's been there acting since July 1.
Yep. So, well, thank you all. I'll look into some of these different things and try to get some ideas. Like, I believe we do have, like, when it comes to regionalization, because I don't believe they've fully even defined it, I do think we have some time for that. But I will try to look into, like, what does that mean? How do we get the word, like, how do we go out and meet these groups? What are these groups? You know,
But what are we gonna tell them?
Right.
You know what I
We don't
mean?
have
we're
We
not
don't
telling
know
them
nothing.
anything
We're
now.
gonna-
We're not going to look,
Exactly,
yeah, we're
you
not
know.
looking to go see them now.
Exactly.
But if we get to a point, like, Tom's point was, if we get to where we really want to make a recommendation on whether we're not going, let's say regionalization does mean
Right.
consolidation.
Yep.
And a lot of people are saying that's not what it means. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying, let's just say, for argument's sake, a year from now, that's what it is. And we go out to our community, how do we get their input on consolidation? How do we go out and get this word out about what it is, and so that we can know what our community thinks? Because the truth is, that is a local decision.
Well, I think at that point, if something was to come up like that, I think you would probably pack the gymnasium, or the auditorium.
We'd be, yeah.
I don't think
be
you would
that
I
have.
third
do
point
find
that's
when
gonna
you,
be
when
the
you,
identity.
when you
When
say,
it
hey,
comes
we're gonna
around, I
have one
think
high
it would
school on
be-
the North Fork, which has been said by people. I do think a lot of people come out with that,
Yeah.
So I do think that kind of helps with the,
People are going to be passionate about it.
yes.
They're gonna be passionate about it. You think, we demystify it
Yeah.
and, get the word out.
Once we're demystifying.
Once we know what it is.
Once the
Once
state-
they demystify it, then we'll, yeah.
Once the state figures
Once we
it out.
know,
Yes.
and the word gets out, this place will be packed.
Yeah.
It'll be packed.
Once the state figures it out.
All right.
And
But I'll look into that also a little bit. and,
I'm not a negative
yeah.
person, but the state in its infinite wisdom, it'll be forever.
Yep.
Do we need a motion, or this wasn't a regular meeting, we didn't take it? Well, we can take it. A motion to adjourn?
So,
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.